Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Markcast here. Reed here. A little different angle today. We saw Trevor Harris take a hit at the end of the game last night. I'm a little bit on the IR as well right now. Was filming a wedding on Saturday. Felt a pop in the back of my right leg and limping. Got my leg elevated here. So I appreciate everyone working through. Less than ideal here. I got my mother's compression sock on and we're working through it. Welcome. We have been doing these every Monday through the XFL season with Andy Murray, Pat Ruffino here through the USFL. And now we have Jason Hussey joining today, as well as special guest Evan Willsmore. Appreciate this kind of the knee-jerk reaction Monday morning. What did we learn from the, whatever league of choice over the weekend? Pat Ruffino and I will be back tomorrow. Same time, we'll be doing the USFL recaps, analysis, and then obviously the ratings that should be coming out for that as well. Bring in my co-hosts for today. We have Jason Hussey here. First off, Jason, how are you?
Doing great, Reed. How are you?
I'm good. We're working through, and then we have Evan Willsmore here. Evan said, I got a lot to talk about for the CFL as well. James checking in. Anytime we have, raise your hand if your team is undefeated right now in the CFL action. Got a lot to talk about with Jason as well. Everything else. But first off, Evan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Excited to talk about some, CFL football, start of a 21-week season in full. So, yeah, lots to cover just in week one already.
Yeah, so we'll go. Jason was with me for our pregame kickoff show with Naylor and Farhan and everyone else. That's good if you want to go back and check that out. Chris checking in as well. Hey, Hussey. First off, Jason, we're back. CFL. I'll pull up kind of all four games here. But what did you make of just the weekend overall? And then obviously we'll go week by week or game by game.
Well, first of all, I just love that CFL football is back. I think most importantly, that's the biggest thing. But I think in terms of the games themselves, a little bit sloppy to be expected. CFL short preseason. So, I mean, it didn't really surprise me, but I thought the quarterback play wasn't very great this weekend. But again, to be expected.
Evan, what about you? We're back. We've lived through XFL and USFL here. What did you make it back to the Canadian game?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. Like Jason said, it's week one. You got to shake off a bit of rust. Outside of the Winnipeg and Hamilton game, there wasn't a ton of scoring. And yeah, the quarterback play was kind of iffy. We'll get into more of that later, kind of about the just the general quarterback situation in Canada right now. But overall, I thought it was good. I like that there was at least a lot of close games. Not everything was a blowout, again, except maybe the Winnipeg game. They really, blew the brakes off Hamilton there in the first half. But, yeah, other than that, a decent way, I think, to start the CFL season.
It was good. It was exciting. I watched three. The Saskatchewan was tough. I will say, for people in the States, I thought, and Jason and I talked about this on the pregame, I thought the CBS Sports Network worked great. Able to go on, I could go on Fubo, kind of pre-record all of those. But the CFL Plus ones, I wish there was a way they could get the games back on afterward. Like, I understand maybe we can't do, like live rewinding or anything on the TSN broadcast, but if we could embed those somewhere after, that would be phenomenal. Because like I was able to go back and watch the Ottawa game in full. Was not able to do that as much with the Saskatchewan one, just because of kind of the broadcast windows are on. Evan, did you have a problem watching any of the games? I know there were some issues as well with like the box scores updating on the website over the weekend.
Yeah, the scores were definitely a bit of a problem on the CFL website. It seems that they've got that, figured out now that all the games are over. But viewership-wise, the stream on CFL Plus worked fine for me. I kind of had to bounce back and forth between that and then CBS Sports Network, which I have through YouTube TV. It's kind of a weird system. Again, I expected going into this season I would just be able to use ESPN Plus. Like, that's what I subscribed to ESPN Plus for. But obviously, that partnership is no longer in place, and it's now moved over to CBS Sports Network. So it was a bit weird. But again, one of those week one things. I'm sure I'll get used to it as the season goes on, figuring out which game is on CFL Plus and, what's on CBS. So it was all right. There wasn't a problem, at least with the quality of it.
What did you make, Hussey, kind of having everything back? I kind of, I like the Rod Smith and everything else. I kind of like getting the kind of the familiar voices of all that. Did you enjoy the broadcast of the games?
Yeah, I always enjoy the broadcasts that TSN puts out there. I mean, besides the TSN panel, they're just so not funny in my opinion. But other than that, I always do enjoy the broadcast themselves. I think the play-by-play guys do a great job, and yeah, no problems from my end up here in Canada.
Yeah, you're living the dream up there. I don't understand the hate the panel gets. Obviously, I've been trying to get Kate on the podcast for 3 years. I've had Milt on, I've had Davis Sanchez on, I've had Dunnigan on, I've had Naylor, obviously. But Evan, what do you make of the roundtable? Because I do get this a lot that people don't seem to like it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get to see as much of it, right? Because on CFL Plus, you're not
Oh, that's
really,
true. Yeah.
they got the kind of little ad breaks where they don't show you anything. So unless you're watching on, I think, CBS Sports Network, you don't really see much of that. I mean, going back to like when the games used to be on ESPN or ESPN2, ESPN Plus, whatever, I thought they were decent. I mean, it wasn't. To me, it's just more exciting that like those guys, like some of them, like Milt, had great careers in the CFL, and that they can still invest time into that all these years later. Especially with some might argue that the state of the CFL game might not be at its peak right now. So I don't think their job is easy, which might mean sometimes the product isn't as great, but overall I think they're doing a good job. And I mean, yeah, they might not be the best group of people, but at least they have some experience and they know what they're talking about, because again, to people especially who are watching in America, the CFL is a very niche product.
Yeah, we have a question here. We'll bring up how to watch. I will say, yeah, tuning into the CFL Plus, they just have that slate at the beginning, and obviously they're not showing all the ad breaks. And I did tweet out, I said, this would be a great, and I'm not trying to self promote, but if get Marshall Ferguson or someone in there, like do a little YouTube thing leading into it. I just think that's. I get we can't show the ads, and we're TSN's paying the broadcast window. Get someone that you trust in there. Get a Marshall. Get someone like, hey, I'm sitting here with my webcam. Welcome to the show. We got this coming up. Like, I think that's a really easy way if you're not going to be able to show the pregame of the TSN game to be able to do that. Yeah, Jersey King says, love it. Yeah, we're getting a lot of our American people trying to watch the games. It's basically 50-50 because half the ones this weekend you can watch on the Fubo, and some of them are on the streaming. If it's right, is there kind of a method to that madness? I just kind of would look on there and see if it was on Fubo. Otherwise, I knew it was on CFL.ca. Evan, did you make any heads or tails of how to figure out which ones were which?
Yeah, I found something on the CFL website and I wasn't able to find it again, but they kind of had a little brochure or a PDF or something like that that would tell you, where each game was, whether it was CFL Plus or, CBS Sports Network. And then obviously TSN, if you're in Canada, that's not a problem. But for us, yeah, I mean, I referenced that a bit. But again, yeah, I had a similar situation to you, Reed. It was more like, if it's not on my TV guide on CBS Sports Network, I know I'm going to have to stream it off my laptop on the CFL website with CFL Plus.
Yeah, across the pond says Riders 1-0. That's all that matters. So we'll get into the games here. Exciting stuff. How do we get this back up? There we go. So first off, we did our big pregame. We'll start at the beginning. BC Lions here. Obviously, my game of the weekend. We can get anyone's thoughts on that. Vernon looking insane on there. I'll pull in here. But Jason, overall thoughts? Was this your top game? And what did you kind of initial thoughts?
Well, I think that this game was kind of surprising to me. I thought it was going to be a lot closer. I thought it was going to be a little bit higher scoring. I thought that Calgary kind of struggled really all the way up until like midway through the fourth quarter, and then they starting to turn it on a little bit. They got a couple of drives together, but overall, just a very disappointing performance from them. Jake Mayer, it's starting to stand out to me that he's struggling in these matchups against BC dating back to last season. And I think that's interesting because you look at how he's played against Winnipeg in the starts he's had against them, and it's a drastic difference. Winnipeg, he's actually played very well against. So that BC defense is no joke. I've been saying it for a while now on my channel that they have a chance to be the best defense in the CFL this year, and they showed it week one.
Yeah, I know, and I get into this kind of the knee jerk, and the CFL season is a marathon, not a sprint. But Vernon Adams really did look like the greatest quarterback in the league. It was like 8 for 8 going down, and then I think it was 9 with the conversion on that. Evan, I know we're big fans of VA, everything in our group and everything else. What did you make of Vernon's performance?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Outside of the turnover, I thought that was, probably the best game he could have had. And, like Jason said, maybe you hope for a bit more scoring, especially on the Calgary end. But like Vernon came in and, he exceeded my expectation for a week one game, especially because this is a pretty new environment for him. He's got big shoes to fill. And I put that out on Twitter. I said, Lions fans were, blessed last season with the presence of Nathan Rourke up until his injury. You bring in Vernon Adams, who had a pretty good career there in Montreal, but it's a different environment for him. So, to see him flourish, and again, he had some pretty good weapons, like Dominic Rhymes picked up right where he left off from last season, being one of the top receivers in the CFL. But yeah, I was very impressed with Vernon as the bottom line. And if he continues, at that general pace, I'm sure he'll have a couple games where, things might drop off or whatever, but this is a really good start, and he should definitely be happy about that.
I think Vernon's the kind of guy that like lives and dies just like in every moment, right? And I think he kind of you ride that emotion with him. I saw him after the game. He's looking up, he's thanking God, breathing on the sidelines. You can just read that emotion, and yeah, if he's playing good and he's feeling it, right, he's gonna be king of the world. But if it's the other way, if they start getting too much pressure, whatever, like he does seem like someone that kind of gets faltered that way. It's crazy though here with the receivers. Lucky Whitehead kind of in and out, wasn't even really a part of it. It just seemed he has so many different tools there. This dude Justin McGinnis, I said when he got kind of the game sealing a reception there on the sidelines, I'm like, that's my guy. Like I want to buy his jersey. I thought he was a good pickup. What did you make, Jason, of just kind of the tools Vernon had?
I think it's a great receiving core that the Lions have. And I think especially you saw that connection with Dominic Rhymes. Rhymes, I rated a little bit too low. I actually already regret where I placed him on. I did a top 50 players countdown over on my channel. I had him at like 28th, I believe. And honestly, if I have to do it over again already, I probably would have had him in the top 20. He had an excellent season last year. I just didn't think he was going to follow it up. But you saw in week 1 already producing 2 touchdowns. Having a great connection with Vernon Adams. And then the other guys, I think they have a lot of height in this receiving core. You look at a guy like McGinnis that they bring in. He was a former first-round pick in Saskatchewan, so it's good to see him producing a little bit. Whitehead, like you said, didn't get much out of him, so you don't expect that to continue going forward. You think he's going to have some bigger games, so things look good for the BC Lions receiving core.
Well, and even Keon Hatcher, is he injured? What's his deal right now? Because obviously that's another huge tool.
I think he's on the 6-game injured list, I believe. Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, but here, that was what was insane to me. Like Lucky Whitehead, 3 receptions here. Like even the guys that you would think that he would go to, obviously Dominic Rhymes is, one of the kind of the elite guys on that, but he didn't even have kind of his full slate or was even working with his full slate last night.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Evan.
Oh, Evan, any thoughts? Any thoughts on kind of, Keon missing Lucky obviously out, but still Vernon kind of finding everything?
I mean, yeah, like for a long time, BC had Brian Burnham. That was the guy that they could always go to, and now you have to replace that, right? Obviously, Dominic Rhymes had a very good season last year. I think he had 1,400 yards, was second in the CFL behind Dalton Schoen in Winnipeg. I think it speaks to his sort of, veteran presence, and it's not about – it's not always about the guy, the top guy. Like you can have, like that receiving core is very deep, and you can see, how many receivers they were able to catch passes. So I think that was just Vernon's ability to, find players and spread out the field, and it worked out really well for them, clearly.
I think it was Naylor tweeted out, like, I haven't seen the BC quarterback have as great of a week 1 since, Nathan Work last year. I mean, obviously, high expectations, but I don't know. To me, there's a lot of pressure on Vernon. Like I said, I love him as a man. I want him to exceed as good as a leader and as a quarterback as he is as a human being. I'm glad he saw that. In terms of Calgary, I thought it was interesting. I think it was going into half the sideline interview, and Farhan was. I thought Jake was actually kind of curt with Farhan, where Farhan's like, what do you make? Jake's like, I don't like. We need to do better. Like I thought he was almost kind of rude that way. I'm surprised that Jake, here's someone that really stepped up with with Bo Levi and all of that. Jason, what did you make of Jake Mayer's kind of struggles here through the game, 20 of 36?
Well, I alluded to a few minutes ago that he is looking to really struggle in these matchups against BC. Looking back to the playoff game last year, a couple of the matchups during the regular season last year, he struggled against BC. So this is becoming a trend for him. But I'm not going to be too worried about Mayer until he struggles next week at Ottawa. I think that's a perfect bounce back opportunity for him. But at the end of the day, what I saw from him in this game is that he's pretty hesitant out there. He just kind of hesitated to make some throws. And I really saw that as the strength of his game, guy that can get the ball out quick. Not going to be a guy that pushes the ball down the field a ton, but he's a guy that can make quick decisions and keep your offense on track. And that's something that we just simply didn't see in week 1.
Evan, are you worried if you're a Calgary fan? Are we worried right now, or is this too soon to tell?
Yeah, I think it's too soon to tell. People who know me, or at least that are in my circle, will know that I'm a big Jake Mayer fan. I've been following him since he was a rookie in Calgary. And, I always kind of knew that he was going to take the throne to Bo Levi Mitchell, or at least, take over. Yeah, it was a bit of a slow day for him. Again, week one, is this an accurate representation of who he is as a quarterback? No, he's going into year 3 now. So I would hope that over the course of the season that we do see a lot of development. I know last night, one of the broadcasters mentioned that, but when they were talking about Taylor Cornelius in Edmonton, it was the same thing. Chris Jones is hoping to get more out of him in year 3. And it's kind of those first 2 years, especially at the quarterback position in the CFL, where you have some things to iron out. It takes a while to develop. But we'll get to Edmonton later. I mean, just talking about Jake Maier, I still think he's going to have, some moments like this season where, like what we saw against BC, where, he has some slower games. But like Jason said, you play Ottawa next week. That's a perfect bounce back opportunity. That's the time where you can go out and maybe have a 300-yard, 2-touchdown, no turnover type of game. And if he does that, then that's great. Then there's no need to be worried about it at all. And even if he doesn't do as much as that, I'm still not going to be worried. It's only if he replicates that kind of thing that we saw in BC, where, if I was a Calgary fan, I'd be like, okay, maybe he's a bit further behind than we would like at this point in his career.
Chris checking in here says, love the Stamps, Mayor, tough loss. We have friend of the show, Tim Capper, over with the Montreal Alouettes Flight Deck podcast. If VA has another season like 2019, BC is going to be tough to beat. I don't know. I mean, it felt like, I don't know, people doubted BC going into last year. We had Nathan, kind of all of that here, Vernon coming up. Like I said, it's doing that over, 18 games or whatever. Right? That's where I worry a little bit about that. Jason, any other thoughts on BC or Calgary? We'll move on to your TiCats. Anything else from the first game?
Well, one guy I wanted to shout out is Matthew Betts, defensive end for the BC Lions. He's a guy that I kind of wrote off. He was a first-round pick. I believe he was second overall by the Edmonton Elks a few years ago. I believe it was 2019. And then in 2021, the year after the canceled 2020 season, he comes in. He didn't really do much. Got a lot of starts at the defensive end position for Edmonton. Then moved on to BC, got a big contract from them before really producing anything. Has a really good year last year and had an excellent game in week 1. So I think he's a guy that's really living up to his potential.
Perfect. Evan, anything else? We'll move on.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, here we go. So this was, to me, my game kind of to watch, keep an eye on here. I tweeted out going in. I watched part of the game, and then I had to take my wife out to dinner, and I kind of watched the rest driving home. I tweeted out, is this the Bo Levi Mitchell experiment over? And I had auto-corrected it to Bill. So I had is the Bill Levi Mitchell era over? And I had a lot of people saying, well, he certainly is playing like Bill Levi right now. Jason, this was your guy kind of watching coming in here. What did you make of your TiCats losing here to Winnipeg 31-42?
Well, interestingly enough, I was going to say, when we were talking on the live stream, I said what I was looking for were the passes for Bo Levi, or were they going to come up short? Or they, is it going to be a lack of arm strength from them? And honestly, I did not see that. It wasn't a physical problem from him. It was mostly him overthrowing passes in this one. Missed a ton of deep open receivers in this game. So I think if he can improve that, take a little bit of heat off those passes, get more chemistry with receivers, I think he could play significantly better going forward. I didn't see anything from a physical standpoint that could limit him going forward. So he looks healthy. He just needs to play with more consistency, more accuracy, and we'll see if he can do that going forward. But honestly, I don't have that many concerns given how poorly he looked in the first half against Winnipeg.
Evan, thoughts on Bo Levi?
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. Bo Levi, I think, has definitely been on a bit of a downward turn in the past couple of years. And, whether that's age or situation, it's kind of hard to tell, right? I was hoping, maybe he'd have more of like a bounce back in week 1 here. Again, Winnipeg is an incredibly difficult opponent, to be going up against to start your season. But even then, I was watching him and I just didn't really, again, it's week 1, let's not overreact. These are all knee-jerk reactions like we keep saying. But, I'm a bit worried, I think, because, it's a big period of change for Hamilton. They're definitely going through a bit of a rebuild. Jeremiah Masoli is gone. Dane Evans is gone. Bo Levi is kind of the guy. I mean, you've got, my guy Matt Schultz behind Mitchell, who, I think could, still be a decent starter in the CFL. But, it's a lot more. Hamilton kind of went from having, 2 of what were, once viewed as like the top quarterbacks in the CFL, really, because even when Dane Evans wasn't starting, he was viewed as a very good passer. But now you have, an older Bo Levi Mitchell and then a career backup in Matt Schultz is just kind of like, this is one of those more interesting situations, in my opinion, to see, how that kind of plays out throughout the season. And if Bo Levi really can bounce back, or if he really is sort of in that period of his career where it's just going to be more gradual decline. And that's nothing against Bo Levi. He's a great, he's played in the CFL for, longer than I can remember, because I'm a young guy, and I've, watched him for many, many years. But, it just, you kind of have to ask yourself, he gets a fresh start here. And, I think it's going to take a couple weeks before I can really, again, get a solid opinion on that. But right now I'm not sold on BLM.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's week one. It's a new offense. All that. Butler looked really good. That was obviously kind of the big loss coming from BC over there. Jason, what did you make of Butler, Tim White looking good? Kind of the rest of everyone that kind of under Bo Levi.
Well, I think they were mostly getting open, and Bo was just missing them a lot of the time. I mentioned a couple of those deep passes. Butler did cough up a key fumble in this one, so that's something you don't like to see. But I think Butler overall looked very good and could give something to this running game that they haven't had for a few seasons. Hamilton not known traditionally as a team that runs the ball a lot, so it's good to see them commit to the running game a little bit more in this game. So we'll see what Butler does going forward, but I think that they have enough there on the offense that I have confidence in them going forward, but we just need to see it and see them gel more together.
I got an email. I think like Grey Cup presale was going on today. I think they were already doing, which it feels early to me, but I think they want TiCats fans here, buy in right now, get into the Grey Cup kind of before Bo kind of craps the bed here. Evan, what did you make? Winnipeg looking good. Caleros is always, Brady Oliveira, so good. Obviously you have the Andrew Harris and all that for years. Now Brady there, everything else. What did you make of Winnipeg?
Fantastic. That's the one word I'll say to describe Winnipeg. They have been sort of, the top of the top at the CFL now for a couple years, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop. Caleros had probably one of the best first halves I've ever seen by a quarterback, at least during my time watching the CFL, and that was in week one. He had 189 yards just in the first quarter, and he had damn near 300 by the time, it was halftime. So, yeah, it was extremely impressive. And then, you look at the supporting cast, Brady Oliveira, Nick Dembski, even Rashid Bailey got in there a bit. Winnipeg hasn't lost a step, clearly. They are still, I think, setting a standard in the CFL. And that's good to see. Might be annoying for some, especially someone like Jason, if you support Hamilton and you know how many times Winnipeg has hurt you in the past. But at the end of the day, they are playing, some of the best football that you can ask for. And that's really good just for the league as a whole.
Jason, thoughts on Winnipeg here, just continuing to look just, in a league of their own?
Well, this is just an all-time team at the top of their game. There's not much really more you can say. Zach Collaros is clearly the number one quarterback in the CFL, all due respect to how Vernon Adams played in week one. But Zach is clearly still the top dog. They have just such a complement of receivers. Kenny Lawler didn't even play in this game. He's dealing with some kind of passport kind of problem, but he's expected back later in the season. So that's going to add another element to that offense. I think all their Canadian guys played very well on offense. And then on the defensive side, Willie Jefferson is just one of the most freak-like defenders I've ever seen play in the CFL. He has these long alligator arms and just, well, maybe not alligator arms. They're not exactly the longest arms, but he has these long freak-like arms, can knock down passes at a rate that I've never seen. Just such a dynamic player. And they just have so many playmakers throughout this roster. They played so many big games together. Just so much trust in that team going forward.
In terms, if I'm a BC Lions, I am a BC Lions fan. Evan is. Well, how are we feeling with the West here? Is it still going to be owned by Winnipeg here, Jason?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think maybe we see BC Calgary round into form throughout the season, but I think if Winnipeg gets that first place in the West, gets the West final in their home building again, I think that no one's really going to stop them on their way to the Grey Cup this year.
Chris here, as they were talking about Collaros getting, we're covering Evan here, talking about Collaros getting snatched up by the NFL. Like, why is that? Like, why did Rourke get all the accolades here? We're like immediately going Rourke to the NFL. Like, what about Collaros here? Collaros has been lighting it up for years. Any thoughts, Jason?
I think it's mostly just due to an age thing. I think that Rourke was pretty damn young. I think he didn't really have too many stops in the NFL. I think he was just in one rookie mini camp before he came to the CFL. So I think he's like 23, 24 years old. So he's still a guy that the NFL covets. Whereas, we've seen year in, year out in the CFL historically, the older quarterbacks don't really get that chance. Anthony Calvillo, Henry Burris, those guys that were great later in their career in the CFL. They just didn't get a chance because the NFL doesn't view them as having that potential to grow.
In terms of anything else from this, Evan, Jason, Jason, as a TiCats fan, how do you feel coming out of this performance? Because obviously we can be analytical about it, but how do you feel as a fan?
Well, I expected it because I'll give you guys a stat. The Tiger Cats are 2-15 in their last 17 week 1 games. So, I just expect the week 1 loss at this point, especially given a really tough matchup. So I'm not too concerned. I'll be very concerned if next week when I go to Toronto to go see them play, if they lay a similar performance. But as of right now, I'm not too concerned given the opponent and that it's week 1.
Evan, anything else from Winnipeg, Hamilton?
Just going back to that Zach Collaros thing for a minute, why he wouldn't be in the NFL. At this point, certainly, like Jason said, age is the number one reason. Rourke is in a completely different position in his career, was only in the CFL for 2 seasons. But, you look at a guy like Collaros, if I'm in his position, it's like, why would you leave? Because you're not going to go and start in the NFL. You're very good, but at this point, you can stay in Canada. You're making, good enough money. You're playing well, you're competing for a Grey Cup every year. They're still going to do it again this year, which is like the 4th year in a row, which is ridiculous, or at least that's what it looks like. I don't think anyone would really argue with that. So, yeah, for Collaros at this point, I think it's just, ride it out in Canada and, have a great time. And there's been many quarterbacks, like that in the past, Henry Burris, Anthony Calvillo, everyone Jason said, those guys just kind of rode it out in Canada. And I think they ended up being a lot more successful there than they would have been just hanging around in a couple of NFL camps.
Jay Thompson says, I feel like we're in the golden age with all the leagues. And very exciting. We're rolling through here. We're rolling through XFL, USFL, all that. Chris here, he's a Schultz fan, #1 on that. So, and we had, the Jersey King guy? He's excited about the CFL. We're getting a lot of our alt football guys here learning about the CFL coming in here. So exciting there. Going through, I was excited to watch this game. I did watch this game in full yesterday, kind of on demand on Fubo. REDBLACKS here against Alouettes. This was a really weird game. Jason, what did you make of just the thesis of this game from the beginning?
I just think it was sloppy overall from both teams, honestly. I think that Cody Fajardo played well enough in his Montreal Alouettes debut. He played a relatively clean game. But again, you saw him take a lot of sacks, a continuing trend from his time in Saskatchewan. Nick Arbuckle on the other side, I just don't think he's it. I don't think you could win games with him in the CFL, and it's been proven over the last couple of years here in multiple different stops. And I think if Jeremiah Mazzoli isn't back soon and healthy and playing at 100%, I don't think this team is going anywhere this year.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my tweet here. I had a really funny. Evan, give your thoughts. I'll pull up my funny tweet I had from this game.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with the Arbuckle take. This is, fortunately for Ottawa fans, this should just be a sort of, fill in for a couple weeks before Masoli comes back. This isn't what you have to ride with for the whole season. But, that game, I think, Ottawa, the fact that they were in, that much of a striking distance, 1 touchdown, I think that was a big credit, to their defense, having the reigning defensive player of the year, Lorenzo Malden, he was still doing his thing. But at the end of the day, yeah, their quarterback play kind of hurt them. And, on the Montreal side, I was really impressed with Austin Mack, the receiver. I know, obviously, Montreal's down a couple receivers right now, and he was someone that was kind of, asked to step into a larger role, especially with this being his first year in the CFL. But he was fantastic. Keon Julian Grant is someone I'm really hoping will have a breakout season this year. I've had my eyes on him throughout the entire offseason. And then, yeah, you want to talk about Cody Fajardo here again. I thought he was all right, a bit above average. It wasn't anything, to blow your socks off. He had the, again, big throw to Austin Mack to start the game, and that kind of put Montreal in a pretty positive position, really, for, the rest of the game. But, yeah, there's still a couple things, that he could have done a bit better. Didn't have a passing touchdown in that game, was kind of more of a manager than everything. Stand back, being back in there, I think helped a bit. And again, sort of the receivers stepping up. And then on the defensive side, I know we haven't talked too much defense on the show, but Montreal having Deontay Evans back really proved to be key in that game. Him coming over from Hamilton. I mean, he was in Montreal before in 2019, I believe, but it was nice to have him back. And he definitely, made it known that he wanted to be back and that was a good spot for him. He was very successful from what I remember with Montreal the last time around.
Yeah, I tweeted here, and I had our owner Pierre there say this when Cody got sacked for what felt like the 87th time. They were saying, "Oh, Pierre really is enjoying what he's watching right now." I'm like, he does not look like he's enjoying what he's watching at all. He looks like he's watching the star quarterback. I didn't get the thing with Cody because Cody came out hot, and it seems like you always get that, especially in the CFL. You that hot first drive. He had a huge bomb to Austin Mack. Okay, here we go. We're going. And then it felt like the rest of the game, they go, we got to get the run game going. We got to get Stanback going. We got to get Stanback going. I didn't get that. Jason, why didn't they give Cody? Was it he didn't have enough time to throw the ball? Why didn't we go back to trying to get Cody to pass more? I think he was 14 of 21.
I think it comes down to all of their injuries that they have at receiver, and obviously the loss of Eugene Lewis this offseason. Jake Winnipeg also left out the door, but a guy named Reggie White was their second leading receiver last year. He's on the 6-game injured list to begin the season. So it was really important for guys like Austin Mack, like Evan said, to step up. So I think that's a good sign for them going forward. But I think as for why they didn't lean on the passing game more, I think that I think they saw that their offensive line was struggling as well, but also the lack of receivers, I think, is the biggest thing for Montreal and why they didn't attempt to throw the ball more in week 1.
Yeah, Evan, it felt like, I was trying to figure out the right meme for this. Like Cody, he had no protection, nothing in Saskatchewan. It's like, okay, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here to Montreal and kind of have the exact same issue and just absolutely get my ass beat. Like, Evan, what did you make just of Cody? It just felt like he didn't have any time.
I mean, time and, again, the weapons for me are the big thing, right? I mean, Montreal, took a huge hit in the offseason losing Geno Lewis, who I personally think is the best receiver in the CFL, and we'll get to more of his performance with Edmonton last night in a minute. But then Jake Winnipeg, too, who's now in Saskatchewan. I mean, it was a really rough loss having those two guys. I mean, the one guy I'm really interested to see when he comes back, it's not Reggie White, but it's Greg Ellingson, because I think Montreal would definitely benefit from having that veteran presence. And I feel like even though Ellingson is older now, he might not be exactly playing at an all-star level. Having a guy like that where Fajardo can just kind of, I think, lean on him, because right now, it's like Austin Mack, Keon Julian Grant, so a lot of these, sort of unproven younger guys. You're not sure what they're going to do with the ball. So I think that definitely played a role as to why, Cody maybe didn't have the best night that he could have.
Yeah, Julian Grant looked good. Austin Mack had a couple of really good grabs. I don't know if now maybe we have more trust in this receiving core. We didn't really know, and it was a lot of unknowns. But it felt like when they went to it, and Austin came up clutch, when he needed to a couple different times. I don't know. Do you see them adjusting that philosophy going forward, Jason?
In terms of throwing the ball more, you think?
Well, yeah. Just in terms of okay, now maybe we kind of have a little bit of an idea of what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it will probably be matchup based. I think Ottawa going against the reigning most outstanding defensive player, Lorenzo Malden. So I think they got a lot of pressure on Montreal that maybe other teams won't. So I think that's a factor. And I think if they get healthier in the receiving core, I think that will be an influence on whether or not they pass the ball more going forward.
We have here insights at Tim Capper. Go back and watch the sacks. Stanback missing the blocks were the cause of many of them. He admitted as much to me post-game. Appreciate that. Evan, any comments on Tim's comments here?
I mean, yeah, Stanback, I said earlier, I mean, he definitely helped, but it was also a bit forced. And, he did not have his best game, especially by William Stanback standards, because people forget, I believe he was hurt last year, but, prior to that, I mean, he was one of the top running backs in the CFL. No one was stopping that guy, 100 yards every game. I mean, he kind of, I think last year you could probably argue that James Butler was maybe the top back, who's, now in Hamilton and helping out their run game. But I've always been a big Will Stanback fan, and I hope that, he can sort of take some of that pressure off Fajardo as the season goes on. I hope that they can kind of get him back in the groove after not having him there for as long, and to just, again, because, some of these guys that are on the 6-game injured list, they're not going to be coming back right around the corner. That's a decent chunk of the season that they could be missing. So, I hope, again, Stanback can get back in there. And, I think, again, Montreal's offense wasn't disappointing by any means. They did a lot with, sort of the situation that they were presented with. Again, Austin Mack blew me away. That was phenomenal. I think, I was talking to Emery Hunt, and he was saying, yeah, this guy, should still be in the NFL. Excuse me. It's a shame that he isn't, because he was kind of stuck on a couple practice squads between, I think it was, Giants, 49ers, and Titans, something like that. But yeah, I mean, bottom line, again, get Stanback more involved. Maybe that boosts things.
I do feel like Emery watches every single game of football that's ever played. I love Emery, friend of the show.
Yep.
Emery, and he works for CBS Sports Network, but he's watching the Elf, he's watching USL, he's watching all this stuff. The thing with Stanback, it did feel like he finally got like one big run at the end. But yeah, we're 16 of 42 here, what 2.6 average. Like it felt like, okay, we're going to the detriment. And then they finally got a little bit at the end, but I don't know if it was worth sacrificing that much of the game philosophy. Jason, any other thoughts on that? And then we'll get to Ottawa.
Well, I think it's interesting because Stanback finished the season. When he came back from the injury last year, it was kind of unexpected. But he ended up coming back and playing about the last month of the season, and he didn't look too good, and that carried over to this one. So hopefully he can pick it up going forward, get back to that guy that was averaging 5-6 yards per carry in 2021, that is. And I think that he can get back to that level, but they also have other running backs they can use. Jeshwin Antwi had a really good season for them last year. Walter Fletcher is a guy I really like. So they have options in that backfield. Maybe they should get these guys more involved in the passing game with all those wide receiver injuries that they've had. So, I mean, I think that's a consideration for them going forward, but I'm kind of concerned about Stanback's poor performance carrying over to this season.
I agree here. Speaking of poor performances, Ottawa, Nick Arbuckle, I don't believe is it. I don't think he is the answer to any question ever here, maybe except who I don't want as my quarterback. Evan, what did you make of Nick Arbuckle's performance here for the REDBLACKS?
Yeah, well, I was saying it earlier. Fortunately for Ottawa fans, this isn't the long-term thing, right? You're hoping Masoli comes back. And again, I know Masoli's aging. I know he's more injury-prone, and he's coming off a pretty big one, right? The fact that, this injury of his is lingering into the following season is a bit concerning, but it is expected at his age. With Nick Arbuckle, yeah, I mean, at this point, he's kind of a journeyman backup, sort of like the Ryan Fitzpatrick that you'd have in the NFL, been with a lot of CFL teams. It hasn't necessarily been a full-time starter in a while, from my understanding. But yeah, this was, to me, I mean, I don't know. I would have hoped for a bit more out of him, especially because this game for Ottawa did still feel like winnable. Like, again, it was a really weird kind of matchup. Like, the fact Ottawa was really in it all was a bit interesting, considering Arbuckle threw 3 interceptions. But yeah, Ottawa, I mean, I really hope, and we'll get to it with Edmonton too, but I really hope this is the year Ottawa turns things around, because it just feels like for the longest time, last year they were building a lot of hype around getting guys like Jeremiah Masoli and Jalen Acklin, and trying to build the culture there. But so far, it just hasn't really worked out. Last year, Masoli got hurt, and then from there, things just kind of fell apart. Unfortunately, they still have a pretty good defense, again, headlined by Lorenzo Malden, who we've already talked about. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, right now, Ottawa is still in a hole, and they still need to pull themselves out of that hole.
Sorry, I'm just laughing here. Chris says, stand back, should stand back and block his ass. We're talking about the missed assignments for the blocking. Jason, what did you make of Nick Arbuckle? And then we'll get into the rest of kind of Ottawa. But just this got to be his last stop here?
As the starter, as a guy that's been given the chance to start, I definitely think it's the last chance, because he's been in 3 or 4 spots now. Back up to Bo Levi Mitchell in Calgary, 2021 with Toronto, then Edmonton to begin last year. So yeah, this is like his 4th opportunity to have a good amount of games to start here, and honestly, he just hasn't made the most of it. I think that the turnovers really piled up for him in this one. You saw that last year with him, where he had just like a brutal, I think it was like 2-11 touchdown interception ratio last year. You can't have that. And I think that when you look at this game, the box score, that's what really stands out. Cody Fajardo, no turnovers in this game. Nick Arbuckle with 3. So, I mean, I think that's a really crucial thing in this game. He forced it into double coverage a couple of times, which was pretty disappointing. And I just don't think he has it from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint. I think he can be a backup in this league still, but I don't think anybody should view him as a starter or even a stopgap option at this point.
Well, and Jason, they weren't even good interceptions. Like you said, it's
Yeah.
like we're throwing in, it's double, like it wasn't even close. I mean, sometimes you get these fluky, whatever, okay, bounce off, whatever, the guy scoops it up. Like it wasn't even close. It really felt like it was poor decision making at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. They were clean.
And was it? So it was just such a weird game because didn't the Red Blacks like miss a couple field goals too. It was a horrible day for special teams. A friend of the show, Richie Leone, had had the miss, like the fumble. He was trying to punt, and then he had the bad kickoff and all that. But was it? It was so close. It felt like Ottawa really could have won this. Am I misremembering that Ottawa had a couple of missed field goals?
I don't think Ottawa missed any field goals. I
Was
don't
it
actually
Cote? Okay.
I'm not too sure. I know Calgary, Rene Paredes missed a couple of field goals in that opening game.
Okay.
But no, the difference is I think Ottawa just didn't score any touchdowns, and that's really the end of the day a problem for them that's been dating back a couple of years now with this offense.
Evan, thoughts on the rest of Ottawa sans Nick Arbuckle?
I mean, yeah, Ottawa, on the special teams front, I think the one thing that really did them in was they had there was like a couple plays that they had to redo because of flags that would have been good for Montreal. And then the one that actually counted, from what I remember, it was like a fumbled snap on third down, and it pretty much set up Montreal with an automatic 1st and goal. And it's just, those little things like that. Again, I mean, special teams, it's something that's overlooked in all aspects of football. It doesn't really matter which league. You could even go down to like the arena level. It's one of these things where it's like, to me, like that is sort of the difference in the game. I think the major thing here is, Fajardo didn't turn the ball over once, and Arbuckle was throwing interceptions left and right. I think that's what it ultimately came down to there. But yeah, special teams definitely, I think, hurt Ottawa more than it helped them in this one, even if they didn't necessarily miss out on direct points.
I do like that. Was it when Richie kind of fumbled the ball? Okay, we tackled him. It was like the 5-yard line or something. Then we come back from break, and Montreal was penalized back. And like, wasn't that the whole thing last year? Like, okay, we got to get rid of Kahari. Like Montreal, like there's no discipline. And remember at the end of the year, and they had the field goal and all that. It was all down to like they had to redo the kick. Like we still have Montreal. I like that ongoing storyline. The Montreal is still just undisciplined. They can't figure that out. Jason, any other thoughts on this one?
Well, it's funny you say that because Kahari Jones is now the offensive coordinator in Ottawa as well. So, I mean, he's involved with this on all angles. So, not much more from me.
Well, I guess before we get off this, so how do we, if we're fans of these teams, like Evan, how do you leave as a Montreal fan? How do you leave? Are we feeling good, bad? How do you feel about this?
I feel confident in the fact that the offense was still able to produce, even if it wasn't perfect, knowing that you're down, a couple of your top options. And then I also leave knowing that like your defense also stepped up, which again should give you more confidence. From the Ottawa perspective, I don't know. If you're an Ottawa fan, I think you're just waiting for Masoli. I don't think anything really counts up until he comes back and the offense actually has a decent option. Again, their defense, in my opinion, is still one of the top in the league. But that's not going to matter if you still have a 0, in the win column, for the next couple of weeks. So again, that's where I stand on that.
Same question for you, Hussey. If you're, both of these teams, kind of your thoughts, how do we leave week 1?
Well, the good news is it's a long season, so they have lots of time to work out the kinks. You don't necessarily have to have this juggernaut record to make the playoffs, especially in the East Division. So, I mean, that's a good thing for these teams, but I think it's a huge win for Montreal, because this could ultimately go down to a tiebreaker at the end of the season between these two teams to get into the playoffs and getting that early East win. That's another thing about the CFL that I don't think I brushed on in the live pregame show was that the CFL's put a lot more of these in-conference games like early on in the season. Like last year, we didn't see that too much. We usually see East versus West games all the way up until the first 5-6 weeks of the season. So the fact that we're getting a lot of these rivalry games early in the season means that we're getting more consequential games for the standings early in the year. So we're learning more about these teams each week.
Was that a conscious choice? I mean, why did they decide to go that route?
I'm honestly not completely sure why they decided to do that. Maybe it was that fans were complaining that certain teams were playing each other too many times back to back in the middle of the season or towards the end of the season. We saw Toronto and Hamilton play 4 times in 6 weeks last year, which was kind of ridiculous. So I'm glad they're kind of spreading it out more, and I kind of like it better this way.
Yeah, I don't think we did like a deep dive analysis of the schedule when it came out. There's certainly been long enough. But yeah, I mean, even next week, Edmonton at BC, Winnipeg at Saskatchewan, Hamilton, Toronto. Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like we're trying to kind of line up some of these consequential, we have one, so then we get into these fun like 3-game weeks and all of that stuff in here. I love the CFL schedule and that. In terms of last game going on here, we had the big 32,000. We're getting Victor Cui kind of packing the Commonwealth there. Evan, what did you make of this? Edmonton still cannot win at home here, going down 17-13 against Saskatchewan.
Yeah, I really thought Edmonton was going to pull through on this one. It looked like, for most of that game that they had a fighting chance. And I'm still waiting for the day where Edmonton can win at home because, I don't know, I think the last time Edmonton won at home, Michael Riley was starting for the BC Lions. So it's been a long time, which is, I feel really bad for their fans, especially because they had such a huge crowd at that game. And it really did kind of come right down to the wire there at the end of the fourth quarter. But ultimately, yeah, I thought this was a pretty entertaining game, from early on. Saskatchewan, from what I remember, came out pretty hot. And then Gino Lewis had a, 102-yard touchdown that really, got Edmonton kind of back in the fold. And then from there, it kind of slowed down until the end. You kind of had a slow second and third quarter from what I remember, a couple of field goals. But yeah, ultimately, I think for both of these teams, it's for Edmonton, I'm not sure if it's a step in the right direction because you didn't get your, home win that you've been looking for almost 4 years now, I guess 3.5 years. But for Saskatchewan, you're 1-0, and considering you only had 6 wins last year, even if it wasn't pretty and you're beating a team by 4 points that hasn't been that great in recent seasons, it's a step in the right direction. Again, especially with the new quarterback, and you've got there was a lot of new people on that side of the Saskatchewan ball. The team almost didn't look recognizable to me. I was looking, I'm like, who are all these guys? Outside of maybe Jamal Morrow, there wasn't very many there that I could really, put my finger on, I guess you would say.
Jason, what did you make of it? I still can't believe coming out, and I want to get into the goal line stand. It's kind of its own thing here at the end, but just overall, Elks still not coming through.
Yeah, I was heartbroken for them. I was cheering for them hard in this game, but ultimately, I thought it was a pretty sloppy game. But I was more entertained by this game than I was the Ottawa Montreal game on Saturday night. I think there was more big plays in this one. I mean, I think that with these new look offenses, it's pretty interesting to see how they work out. I think Trevor Harris threw a really, really poor interception that led to that goal line stand, that goal line opportunity for Edmonton that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think, just really feel for the Edmonton fans and how they didn't get a win here. And I mean, I'll be cheering for them going forward, but it really feels like what a missed opportunity for this team, especially with the big crowd they had there.
Yeah, do you think they'll be able to replicate that again, Jason? Because it's like, it seemed like, and I know like BC does the big concerts and all that stuff, but like to be able to get so many fans in there, have them be so close, heartbroken, do you think they get them back next time? Because I think it's like week after next, right?
Yeah, I think having the guaranteed win tickets helps. Definitely having free tickets to some of these the fans that I don't believe it was all the tickets, but I think a certain percentage of them were guaranteed win tickets. So that will certainly help encourage some of the fans to come back. But at the end of the day, if this losing just keeps persisting, the struggles of the team, I mean, I think that they'll probably have something in the 20,000s for next game. Better than what they were having last year, but I think at the end of the day, they're probably not going to see that same 32,000, I think it was, for this home opener, given what we saw in week 1.
Yeah, I think it was like a select number. Kate was saying on the thing, like, oh, there's still like 9 of these special tickets left. I'm like, they have been pushing this for months. Like, how are there still 9? Yeah. How do you have 32,000 people? Like, it's not criticizing the crowd. It was a great crowd. Like, how do you have 32,000 people there? We still have 9 of these special. Evan, what do you like the golden ticket thing? Or were you a fan of that?
I actually haven't heard much about that, so I'm kind of interested to dive deeper into that. I wasn't really familiar with it.
Yeah, you get there's a certain section. If you buy a ticket there, you buy week 1, and then you are able to sit in that seat every week for free until they win a game.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Maybe for those fans, maybe it's a good thing that the Elks didn't win yesterday. But from the just general football perspective, outside of golden tickets, I mean, we talk about, week one games sort of, being sort of like, they're kind of, you got a knee-jerk reaction, like you're, still a bit rusty. But for Edmonton, it's like you kind of have to start shaking off the rust a bit quicker than the rest of the teams. Because at this point, and I think even, Chris Jones and the rest of the Edmonton staff know, like the excuses have kind of run out. You had your chances to develop players and, bring in guys and whatever, and they're doing that. I like, what Geroy Simon and all of them are doing, building the team. I think they definitely have some interesting players, but it gets to a point where it's like, but you have to win games, right? That's what football is. It's a winning business. You need to win in order to keep your job and to be successful and to compete for Grey Cups. And Edmonton hasn't been doing a lot of that, in a long time. So I hope, I wish the best for them. I'm really hoping. I'm kind of itching to watch every Edmonton home game in full this season until they win that home game. I really want to see that happen. That's like kind of at the top of my list from like the analyst / fan perspective, but we'll see what happens. I genuinely thought it was going to happen yesterday, and unfortunately I was wrong. So we'll have to wait another, I don't know when their next home game is, but I'm sure you can probably check that.
It's Toronto, right? I was
Yeah.
looking on here. Toronto's coming in, whatever, week after next, I think. It was funny. I saw a friend of the show, John Hodge, tweet like Edmonton. I think it was him that said, Edmonton, they wanted to raise up kind of a mediocre quarterback, right? We're going to surround him by elite receivers. And it's kind of the other way around, right? Where he's almost dragging them down. Like that was the same thing last year when they paid up for Kenny Lawler, right? Like we're going to make him be the highest paid receiver. I'm like, who the hell, like for Nick, it's like buying a Ferrari for your brother. Like, who are you? Like, what are we doing with this? Jason, in terms of this goal line stand, I think it was Milt Stegall kind of was talking at the end of the game. I was watching, like, kind of, to me, exemplified everything about this, right? Here you have 3 opportunities to go in, get the score. What did you make of kind of this in Saskatchewan holding them off?
Incredibly disappointing. I think that you really couldn't ask for a better opportunity to take the lead in that situation. 1st and goal from the 1-yard line. And I think your offensive line just has to win in those situations. There's really no excuse. There's no, there's a 1-yard neutral zone in the CFL. You should be able to win those situations, at least if you have 3 cracks at it. So that's very disappointing. I think that I have questions about Kai Loxley being the short yardage quarterback for Edmonton because usually you want a bigger guy running that just to have a little bit more power to get a bit more of a push forward. I don't think he gives you that. He's pretty much a pretty small guy. So very, very disappointing. And I think to go back to Cornelius, I think that, in general, if you take away that 102-yard play, he played pretty awful in this game overall. And honestly, I think, going forward, we need to see that consistency, get that completion percentage, the efficiency of this offense up. I think that's the problem. They're just not gaining first downs consistently enough. And that's a problem that's been persisting for a few years in Edmonton.
Do we see Trey Ford here? Like, what is the deal with that? Do we see him come in, Jason, and then we'll go to Evan?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I think how long until they make that decision to either go to Trey Ford or go to Kai Loxley potentially, who's been around for a couple of years now with the team. So, I mean, I think that, obviously I think they give it a couple of more weeks, but I think if that doesn't happen, I think then that's when you start to consider going to another option because Chris Jones has to win some games like you guys were saying.
Yeah, Evan, thoughts on Cornelius? I know we're fans of him, have tracked him. Kind of anything else with Edmonton here?
Well, this whole quarterback room I really want to talk about for a minute because I'm a big Kai Loxley fan. But as Jason said, he said it perfectly. I don't know if he's exactly a short yardage quarterback as you typically see in the CFL. I would like to see him on certain package plays where maybe, they run I don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to be a run, but, I'd like to see him throw the ball a bit more. And I know he can play a bit of receiver too. So maybe something, in that realm, it would be really interesting for them to kind of shake it up. Like nothing really hurts at this point, given the position they're in. Trey Ford for me is the one that, I would really love to see him, get a couple starts in this season, especially given that he's a homegrown Canadian talent. A lot of the talk last night was, surrounding Taylor Cornelius and, Chris Jones talking about, oh, you're going to see it this year. It's year 3. We've been working on this for a while. But if you don't win games, like, Jason said, outside of that 102-yard play to Geno Lewis, I mean, Taylor Cornelius essentially did nothing, and that's, I mean, I liked Cornelius. I thought he had a high ceiling when he was in the XFL in 2020 with Tampa. I was really excited to see where his career would go, and eventually he landed in Canada, and he's been there, since 2021 now. But at this point, I'm really pulling for Trey Ford to just come in at some point. Again, I'm not saying Cornelius should lose his job because, again, it's only week 1, right? You're going to give it a couple weeks. You're going to see how it is. But if I'm, coaching at Edmonton, or, I'm doing personnel stuff or whatever, I think that leash is pretty short, because even last year, I mean, Cornelius's all-time, win-loss record is like 4-16 or something. It's atrocious. And I don't know what his touchdown to turnover ratio is, but I can't imagine that it's much better, because last night, outside of that, again, the big play to Geno Lewis, he had 2 turnovers, probably like 100 passing yards. That's just not acceptable for a team that's trying to, win. And I feel like it would be such a great story. And again, this is very hypothetical, but imagine if you had, Canadian quarterback Trey Ford start a home game for the Elks, and that happens to be their, first home win. And again, 3.5, 4 years, whatever. I think that would really help sort of build the culture there in Edmonton and kind of get fans back in the stands. And then maybe you maintain that number within the 20,000s.
Jason, any other thoughts on that? Or I do want to touch down on just Saskatchewan kind of as a whole before we get out of here at the hour. Anything else you want to hit on?
Well, I think with with this whole quarterback situation, I think that Taylor Cornelius, I think one of the strengths of his game right now is like running and scrambling around. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Trey Ford would give you. So I think that, when you look at it like that, I think that maybe Trey Ford would be the better option to go to if these struggles continue. See another couple of games like this from Cornelius.
Jason, any thoughts here on Trevor Harris? How did our boy look here coming in? The new look at Montreal Alouettes a little bit.
Well, I'm not the biggest fan of this move to Saskatchewan, as people that have watched my channel know I've called Trevor Harris an East Division quarterback. But at the end of the day, I think that there were some good things from Harris in this game, some good timing routes. He's going to do his thing. He does what he does well, but you all obviously know his limitations, and he can make some real stupid throws sometimes. That second interception was inexcusable for a veteran quarterback of over 10 years in the CFL. Could have gave Edmonton the win there if Edmonton could just convert one play at the 1 yard line. So I think Trevor played okay at times, but overall, I think that they're looking for more from him.
Evan, any other thoughts from you before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, to just touch on Trevor Harris for a minute, I mean, I thought he did okay. Again, he might be entering this sort of phase of his career. I kind of view him and Bo Levi Mitchell in a similar circle. It's like, all right, like, are we going to, bounce back with the new team? Not necessarily saying that, Trevor Harris was bad in Montreal, but it's like, are you going to have another career year? Or are you just going to kind of keep, going on the decline? And by the way, I know I was talking about it to you, Reed, but I cannot believe Trevor Harris is 37 years old. That blew my mind. Because I think Bo Levi is 34. I thought him and, Trevor Harris were the same age. And when they were saying that he was, 37, I was like, that can't be right. Like, that seems really I know he's been around for a long time. Like Jason said, he's been in the CFL now for a decade, but it just never really crossed my mind that he was that old. Like, that was, shockingly old to me.
Yeah.
He's older than I am.
Yeah. And Jeremiah Mazzoli's 36. Yeah. So it's some of these guys are older than we think. And I think Bo Levi Mitchell, I know if McLeod Bethel-Thompson returned to Toronto, Bo Levi Mitchell actually would have been the youngest quarterback in the East Division this year. Believe it or not.
Well, this has been fun. I appreciate it. Jason and I will be here on Mondays doing this. Evans, welcome back as always. I kind of said in our group stream, anyone's welcome. I just like to spread the burden out. We've had Andy doing the XFL and Pat doing the USFL. I never want it to be an obligation here, but welcome anyone. Anything else from Jason or Evan before we get out? Because I know Jason's got to go get some stuff done.
Not much for me. I think, good overall week 1. Excited for week 2.
Evan, anything else from you? What are you going to be looking forward to here this week?
Yep, I would say the same thing. I hope that, as the weeks go on, some of these teams where there's a lot of questions are able to figure things out. And, you say that every season, right? And I hope that, the teams that are doing well continue to do well. You look at Winnipeg and BC, teams like that, again, hoping for continued success and hoping that the teams below that can rise up.
Well, perfect. Hopefully we converted some fans. Like I said, like and subscribe. Pat and I will be back here tomorrow. And then we're still trying to figure out, I got an email at Jeffrey over at XFL, figuring out what is the rookie draft schedule for Friday, because I think we're going to try to go live to talk about that. So lots of excitement here. I appreciate you guys. Let me get this outro stuff here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.